the national championship before we even had the conversation of like, are we together? So yeah, no, that was because like I'm a control freak and I have to be in like my career, but to have a partner that like takes the lead in that way and
wants to show up, like that's yeah.
They did the work, the calls, the flights, the therapy, the check-ins that say, I'm here even when I'm not there. From the outside, it looked steady to people choosing each other in a life that rarely slows down. And then, almost in the same breath as a sweet birthday post, the story ended. Not a pause, not a trial run, a decision, the kind that lands heavy because it doesn't come with villains. Here's how it happened, and why it matters more than the headlines. 2 days. That's the part no one can get over. A warm message, the kind you reread because it feels safe. Then, out of nowhere news that the relationship was over. If you felt the floor drop a little, you weren't alone. People love a tidy narrative. And this wasn't tidy. No slow fade, no cryptic unfollows, no staged hints. Just a door closing where a window had been wide open. But the timing doesn't tell the whole story. It never does to understand the end. You have to start with the beginning. This started with a risk. A simple DM in December, a modern coin toss that could have vanished into the internet. It didn't. They met, they vibed. And by mid-January, the whispers slipped into It wasn't a brand rollout. It was chemistry finding a microphone. She joked about the first kiss being cinematic his Bronco. A grin, a decision to stop pretending it was casual. From the jump, it had that click you can't choreograph. Two people choosing to be brave when guarding your heart would be easier than the world found out. Not through hints or blurry photos, but in bright lights and borrowed tuxedos. Awards season made the soft launch a hard one, and suddenly what belonged to two became a little bit everyone's. Red carpets, arenas, premieres, football games, smiles that made strangers smile back. There's a high that comes with being seen like that. But visibility is a tricky roommate. It keeps the lights on even when you're tired. It invites opinions you didn't ask for. It turns quiet moments into content. They tried to protect the quiet anyway. They set rules most couples never have to say out loud. No more than 3 weeks apart. If you're filming, I'll fly. If I'm touring, you'll come. If something hurts, we name it and work it in real time. Therapy wasn't a last resort. It was an early and ongoing tool. That's not drama. That's discipline. It takes a certain kind of grown-up to look at the parts of yourself that still flinch and say, let's unpack that. It takes two to keep doing it when the cameras aren't around. The easy story would have been a slow build to a forever. They even made the move that usually signals that trajectory. They combined lives, not just weekends. Shared closets, shared mornings, the ordinary magic of arguing over takeout and laughing about it 5 minutes later. She said it out loud, we're unpacked. That's the sentence people point to when they say, I thought this was endgame. And honestly, why wouldn't you? When you bring your whole life into the same space, you're not experimenting anymore. You're committing to the real thing, with all the squeaky doors and midnight compromises that come with it. But work isn't just jobs for people like this. Work is gravity. He had a hit show that lives in the kind of machine that requires late nights, travel miles, and entire months where your schedule isn't yours. She had a new era, a record cycle with a pulse of its own. Writing rooms, rehearsal rooms, green rooms, stages. 2 rockets, 1 sky. The miles add up. So do the time zones, the sleep debt, the adrenaline hangovers. Anyone who's done long distance knows the math. You can be faithful and still be exhausted. You can be in love and still be out of sync. And when both of your dreams are loud, something's always knocking at the door of in at 2 a.m. Her work has always told the truth first. She used a stage to add a verse when life demanded it, turned private ache into public art without naming names, and kept letting the songs carry the weight that interviews can't. The new music sharpened, the edges in the best way, boundaries drawn with tenderness instead of barbed wire. There was a duet that cracked open masculine softness, a reminder that being strong and being open aren't opposites. When a songwriter grows like that, life rarely stays the same around them. Growth is disruptive. It cleans out closets you forgot you stuffed. And she knows how to stand her ground. When a performance choice sparked backlash, she didn't fold. She held her line gracefully, the way people do when they've decided they'd rather be clear than liked. That kind of backbone can be a lighthouse in a relationship. It can also be a mirror, the honest kind that shows you where you still hide. You can love the light and still squint at it. Meanwhile, the world kept cheering them on. Fans turned into detectives, scanning captions for hints, zooming in on rings that weren't rings, quick to turn a cozy photo into a proposal because it's more fun to predict than to wait. They saw domestic snapshots and read next chapter. They saw devotion and read destiny. That's the truth about public love stories. The crowd writes its own script. The couple still has to live it. So why did it end if they did so much right? Maybe because doing everything right isn't the same as being right for the next decade. Maybe because the kindest choice sometimes looks like surrender from far away? A breakup can be quietly the most generous chapter of a relationship, the moment you decide not to stretch something beyond what it can carry. The moment you refuse to make the other person smaller so the love can feel bigger. Sometimes the adult thing is a goodbye that isn't angry, a goodbye that honors the work instead of erasing it. That's why the news felt oddly gentle, even as it shocked people. It wasn't framed as a blow-up. It wasn't scandal and smoke. It sounded like acceptance. Two people who tried, really tried, people who kept their promises to communicate, to show up, to repair. People who, when they reached the limit of what trying could do, chose dignity over drama. It makes for fewer sensational headlines, but it leaves room for something better. Respect what happens now. The machine keeps moving. Scripts keep arriving. Stages keep calling. He'll go where the next scene is. She right where the next song is. But both of them will do it a little different than before, because endings have a way of rearranging your insides. You learn which parts of your day were shaped around someone else's heartbeat. You learn what silence sounds like when it's yours again. You learn what your voice can do when it's not sharing the mic. And for everyone watching, there's a softer lesson hiding in the flashes. Love is not only fireworks and first kisses and vintage trucks. Love is calendars and carry-ons and compromises you can only make for so long before you realize compromise has become identity. Love is rituals you build on purpose. The walk after dinner, the text me when you land, the 3-week rule you invent because the distance is real, even when the feelings are too. Love is honest when it chooses to stop, instead of twisting itself into something unrecognizable. That's not failure. That's stewardship. Think back on the beginning again. A message sent into the void, a risk taken, a life rewritten because two people decided to show up. If you've ever started something that beautiful, you know it changes you whether or not it lasts forever. You become the person who sent the message. The person who kissed first because you'd rather be brave than careful. The person who packed a bag at 11 p.m. because 3 weeks felt like a cliff and you weren't going over it. The person who said, later when the hard truth arrived, we did our best and meant it. People will still ask for reasons. They'll draw maps between filming schedules and album cycles. Circles around dates, arrows toward interviews. They'll build cause and effect where simple humanity would do. But the map isn't the terrain. The real story is smaller and bigger at the same time. Smaller because it happened in the ordinary moments no one filmed. The glance across the couch that said, we're tired. The suitcase left out because it'll be used again in 2 days. The conversation at a too late hour where both voices stayed gentle. Bigger because it's the kind of decision that shapes what comes after for both of them. So if you're looking for a neat answer, here it is. They tried everything they could and chose the kindest ending they had. No villains, no twist waiting in the wings, just two people doing adulthood on hard mode in public, with a kind of care that's easy to dismiss until you need it yourself. And if you're listening because you've been here too, let this part be for you. You're allowed to honor what was without turning it into what-ifs. You're allowed to be proud of the work you did together even if it didn't lead to a forever. You're allowed to remember the road trips and the quiet mornings and the way you became more yourself. Not less, because you loved someone well. You're allowed to let an ending be a completion, not a collapse. Here's the piece that doesn't make headlines but sticks anyway. Endings can be gentle and still be real. They can arrive 2 days after a soft caption and still be honest. They can follow therapy and airplane miles and perfectly color-coded calendars. They can sit beside a record full of growth and a season of career momentum. They can show up when two people who like each other, maybe even love each other, choose to stop before they start breaking the pieces they'd regret losing.
If that sounds unromantic, look closer. There's a romance in it that doesn't photograph well. The romance of respect, of taking care with what you built even as you put it down, of believing that love doesn't have to be punished to end, of trusting that growth sometimes means growing apart and that this, too, can be done with steady hands. So no, this isn't the scandal reel. It's the grown-up reel, the one where the airport goodbyes count as part of the love story, and the last conversation is as careful as the first. The one where two people we've all watched learn, once again, that the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth to each other and to yourselves. The headlines will cool, the questions will fade. The work, the real work, will show up later in the songs, the scenes, the choices. You'll recognize it when you see it. They did the work. They told the truth. And when the truth said, it's time, they listened. That's not the kind of ending that sells out a tabloid, but it's the kind that lets you walk forward with your head up. In the end, that might be the most romantic thing of all. But this isn't just an ending. It's a signal for what comes next. The next tour where the set list gets a new shape because certain songs hit different now. The next premiere where small talk asks bigger questions. The next interview where what used to be off limits becomes material, carefully handled, sharpened by perspective. The next home that feels like your own because it's quiet in a way that isn't lonely. These are the ripples. They're subtle at first, then obvious. You'll catch them the way you catch the first cool night that says the season has changed. Make no mistake, there were bright chapters. The early weeks with inside jokes no one else got. The road trips with gas station coffee that somehow tasted good. The late calls after shows when adrenaline masked exhaustion. The simple joy of being chosen publicly and privately. Those are not erased by the ending. They become the reason the ending is handled with care. And for anyone still wondering how a relationship that looked this solid could close its doors so quickly, spend a week living between 2 time zones and see what it asks of you. Spend a month trying to be your best self at work while being your softest self at home. And notice how those 2 versions sometimes miss each other by an hour or a heartbeat. Add the sound of 1,000 opinions you never asked for. Add the pressure of being role models you never applied to be. Then add the courage to say, we're not going to break this to keep it. That's what maturity looks like behind the curtain. So let the 2-day whiplash be exactly what it is: shocking. On the surface, logical underneath. Let the DM origin story keep its sparkle. It deserves to. Let the red carpet stay beautiful in the memory without turning them into proof of anything. Let the therapy and the rules and the routines be evidence of care, not failure. Let the move-in be what it was, a real attempt to build a real life. Let the ending be the final act of the same loved one that valued truth over optics. And if you needed permission today, here it is. You're allowed to try that hard. You're allowed to love out loud, to post the photo when it feels right, to protect the quiet when it doesn't, to say yes bravely and goodbye kindly. You're allowed to be proud of the way you handled it all. You're allowed to keep going without making anyone the bad guy. Because in the end, the story isn't about why it ended 2 days after a sweet caption. It's about who they were the whole time. People willing to show up, do the work, and then do the hardest work of all letting go with grace. And that, more than any rumor, is the part that will last. They did the work. They told the truth. The ending is not the scandal. The ending is the proof.